Hello and welcome to a comparison of Walsall FC's crossing in the 2024-25 and 2025-26 season with myself, Dylan Hawker, in collaboration with the University of Worcester. Walsall FC are currently competing in the EFL League Two and under head coach Matt Sadler have undergone a period of tactical and structural change in recent years, including a significant upturn in results and renewed promotion ambitions. Informal discussions with Walsall's coaching staff have highlighted a perception that the team's attacking play has increasingly relied on wide play and crossing as a mechanism for chance creation. However, there is uncertainty around whether this increased emphasis on crossing has actually translated into better crossing-related output opportunities compared with the previous season. Given the tight margins in League Two and the club in 2025 being so close to promotion, clarifying the effectiveness of this aspect of the game is particularly important for both match preparation and future recruitment. So, why is crossing such an integral part of football? Well, a study by Smith and Lyons discovered that during the 2002, 2006 and 2010 World Cup, crosses actually created the most goals in all tournaments compared to other methods such as through balls. However, I understand this alone may be insufficient to convey the importance of crossing in football. But this notion is also supported by recent research from Otero et al. 2024, which collected data from the top 5 European leagues in 2020/21. These top 5 leagues being the Premier League, Liga, Bundesliga, La Liga and Serie A. They found that the average crosses per match was 24.36, which was more than any other finishing phase metric they measured. They also deduced a moderate correlation between the number of crosses and shots on target. These facts highlight that crossing is still extremely relevant and can be effective even at the top level. Granted, Walsall aren't at that level. However, with the club's promotional ambitions, it is good to implement and stay aware of trends at the highest level so they can be leveraged to get an advantage at the lower level they currently compete in. From a wider research perspective, crossing remains a contested tactical strategy. Classical notation analysis work has shown that crosses can be an important route to goal, but also relatively low yield compared with other forms of chance creation, especially when measured only by direct assists. More statistical recent studies have shown that when using a large database from elite competitions, it's suggested that a high volume of open play crosses is often associated with lower scoring efficiency, and that games with fewer open crosses tend to produce more goals. Other applied analysis have argued that crossing may be undervalued if only the immediate outcome is considered, and that indirect effects such as second balls, rebounds, corners, penalties, and extended pressure should also be taken into account when judging effectiveness. Across these studies, several factors consistently emerge as critical to crossing effectiveness: the delivery zone, type of cross, and the spatial relationships between attackers and defenders. At the same time, much of the crossing literature is based on elite leagues, for example the Premier League and La Liga, and often uses league-wide or top team samples rather than being embedded within the club's specific tactical context. There is limited evidence on how crossing strategies function in lower league environments such as League Two, where technical quality, pitch conditions, and defensive organisation may differ, and where teams may adopt more direct styles of play. Within the broader performance analysis literature, there is a strong emphasis on designing context-specific, ecologically valid indicators that align with the team's game model and coaching process. Notational analysis frameworks highlight the need to define clear operational criteria for actions such as crossing opportunity, and to link these to to both processes, for example, delivery type, and outcomes such as first contact. This project aims to apply these principles within Walsall FC's environment by developing a club-specific, evidence-informed coding system for crossing actions and their outcomes. So, in consultation with the Walsall FC coaching staff and performance analysis team, and informed by the literature, the central performance question for this project is: how has the volume and effectiveness of Walsall FC's crossing changed from last season to this season? To answer this overarching question, the analysis will focus on 4 sub-questions. How do total crosses and crosses per 90 compare between last season and this season? Has there been a shift between the origin zones of crossing, for example left versus right flank? What proportion of crosses are accurate, i.e. reach a teammate in a contested or uncontested manner? And is an increased volume associated with better attacking returns, or does it reflect low yield strategy in Walsall's current context? I conducted the investigation across both the 2024/25 season and the 2025/26 season to answer my research question, coding the first 5 league games that Walsall played in each season totaling 10 games. This sample size is big enough to give an indication of how the team's crossing has evolved, as it reduces the impact of games that may be seen as anomalous. On screen is the code window I used to collect the crossing data I needed. Before presenting my findings using this window, I want to briefly explain how I ensure the data that I collected was reliable. In performance analysis, there are 3 main types of coding errors we need to consider. The first type is operational error. Operational errors occur when the mechanics of coding are carried out incorrectly. This can include pressing the wrong button, applying the tag too early or too late, selecting the wrong player/event, or missing an event due to speed of play. In short, the error isn't about interpretation, it's about execution. In this project, these errors could have occurred quite easily. For example, I could mistime the start of a cross if the ball was played quickly. I might click the wrong tag if the interface was too crowded. Or, during long coding sessions, fatigue could cause me to miss a crossing event altogether. To reduce the risks, I kept the coding template extremely simple and clearly labelled, following Hughes and Frank's recommendation to minimize operational load. I also avoided live coding and instead used playback so I could pause and rewind actions for precise timings, which aligns with O'Donoghue's guidance. And before collecting formal data, I piloted the system on one match. This allowed me to identify errors early and get comfortable with the layout. Finally, I coded in short, focused blocks to avoid fatigue-related mistakes. The second category is observational error. These occur when the analyst missees or fails to perceive an action correctly. These stem from human perception, being attention, visual angle, camera quality, or complexity of play. In this project, observational errors could occur if I confused a cutback with a cross because of how quickly the ball was delivered. The League 2 camera angle I was provided with obscured the moment of contact. Or I misjudged whether the ball reached a teammate or deflected off a defender. To reduce these observational errors, I watched every cross more than once, including in slow motion. I refused to code actions where the camera angle or visibility was unclear, and I performed an inter-rater reliability test, recoding a sample of events a week later to check that my observations remained consistent over time. The third and final type is definitional error. These occur when an analyst applies unclear, ambiguous, or inconsistent definitions of what counts as a certain action. This is one of the most common error types in performance analysis because coding depends on presence and clarity of operational definitions. For this project, definitional errors could appear if I wasn't sure whether to classify a delivery as a cross or a lofted pass. I applied successful cross consistently, for example not knowing whether a contested touch counted, or I misclarified the zone a cross came from because boundaries weren't clear. To reduce these errors, I wrote clear operational definitions for every category before coding began. I also created visual examples, screenshots of deep crosses, byline crosses and cutbacks, so I applied the definitions consistently. And again, the intra-rater reliability test helped confirm that these definitions worked in practice, not just on paper. On screen is the set of operational definitions used in this investigation to guide the coding process. Although some of these may seem obvious, when aiming to collate a reliable set of data, knowing the outright criteria that must be achieved for every possible instance is vital. It also provides clarification of more ambiguous variables, such as crosses from center and no contact crosses. So when we look at Walsall's data, we can see a very clear pattern. In 2024-25, the team attempted 139 crosses in 5 games, which works out at around 27.8 per 90, but this produced just 1 goal. In contrast, in 2025-26, the crossing volume dropped significantly to 13.4 per 90, yet the team actually scored 3 goals from crosses and improved their success rate from 22.3% to 28.4%. Now, this might seem counterintuitive at first. You might expect that more crosses would generate more goals, but this trend actually aligns very closely with findings from academic research. One particularly relevant study, analysing the English Premier League, found that matches with fewer open play crosses actually produce more goals. The authors estimated that reducing unnecessary crossing could increase a team's expected goal output by around 0.57 per game. The conclusion was very clear: relying heavily on crossing, especially high hopeful balls into the box, is often a suboptimal attacking strategy, and many teams achieve better results when they cross less but create better chances. So when we compare that to Walsall, it makes sense that the team saw better outcomes with a lower crossing volume. Instead of sending in nearly 30 crosses per game, many of which were low quality or poorly supported, the current season appears to show a more selective and purposeful approach. Crosses are happening less frequently, but they're coming from better zones into better structures and with better execution, which is reflected in the improved success rate and higher number of goals scored and successful wins. Also, according to FBref, in the 24-25 season, Walsall averaged 27.4 crosses per 90 in the entirety of the season, meaning they continued to cross at almost the exact same rate as the first 5 games of the season, indicating that the sample size for this investigation was sufficient and that the play style was likely implemented through the whole season. FBref's data also indicated that Walsall crossed the ball more than any other team in the league that season. The average league crosses per 90 was 19.4, meaning that Walsall crossed the ball 8 times more per game than the average League Two side. When comparing the cross locations from both seasons, an independent samples test indicates that there is no significant difference between the data sets, but the visualization does indicate a slight difference, being that crosses in the first season had more coming from the left, whereas in the current season more have been taken from the right. But this is highlighted as insignificant by the test, as the values are too close to conclude that a big change has occurred. Thank you for listening.